Are you interested in pairing your expertise on the distilling process with key business knowledge such as finance, marketing, and operations? Then you need to check out the Distilled Spirits Business Certificate from the University of Louisville. It's an online program that can be completed in as little as 6 courses. The program is taught by both U of L business faculty and corporate fellows, so you are getting real experience from experts at the most renowned distilleries, companies, and startups in the distilling industry. We're talking leaders from Brown-Forman, Beam Suntory, Jack Daniels, and more. Get enrolled to this online program at ufl.me/Bourbon Pursuit.
My dad's famous line is, and I think I said this on episode 1, is if you're drinking beer, you're watching the party. If you're drinking bourbon, you are the party. There you go.
This is episode 243 of Bourbon Pursuit. I'm Kenny, one of your hosts, and how about some Pursuit series news? Now, we don't want to use this as a self-serving platform, but lots of people want updates on what's happening, so here's the latest. Last week, Ryan and I visit our barrel broker, where we get to do what's sort of unusual in the bulk sourced market, where we get to actually hand select every barrel. Now, we've talked about this before, and you're going to hear about it more, but this time we tasted through 22 barrels and wound up choosing 3 barrels of 10-year Tennessee bourbon, and then we also selected 2 barrels of a special rye. We've got a few months until the rye will be bottled, but this stuff blew our minds at only 4 years old because it had such fruity and bubblegum flavors that I think it's going to take everybody by surprise. We've also purchased 4 more barrels from Finger Lakes Distilling, and we'll be releasing more of those relatively soon. We've got other things in the works as well, and you can get all those updates for upcoming barrels in our Patreon community. Lastly, we have finally touched down in Georgia, and more specifically in Atlanta, where there are select retailers with limited amounts of episode 21, and it tastes just like candied pecans. Next week, we have 2 more barrels going up for sale to our Patreon community first before they are released to the general public, and one of these barrels is our first ever 15-year-old bourbon release. It might just be one of my favorites because you know I love that oak. All right, let's get on with the industry news. Right now, coronavirus is on everyone's radar, and we all know the travel industry is hurting because events held worldwide are being canceled. But what does that mean for the spirits industry? Chinese consumers are really tailored more to Scotch and Cognac and Baijiu, where it's going to be hit hardest. Diageo has already cut its full year 2020 profit forecast by up to $260 million as bars and restaurants in Greater China remain empty. Beam Suntory said that the coronavirus situation is creating challenges in key Asian markets in its 2019 full-year results. Pernod Ricard anticipates the outbreak will have a severe impact on its China and travel retail business and cut its guidance for organic growth in profit from recurring operations for fiscal 2020 to 2-4% from its previous expectations of 5-7%. In response to the industry demand for greater clarity during global threats, IWSR Drinks Market Analysis, which is the leading authority on data and intelligence on the global beverage alcohol market, has revealed plans to launch the IWSR Coronavirus Risk Assessment Model, also known as CRAM. The tool will quantify and forecast the impact of key global events, giving industry leaders data-driven insights and situational forecasts to navigate the situation and manage risks. To commemorate the celebration of its 150th anniversary, Old Forester is opening the first ever Whisky Row Retreat. It's going to be a unique, immersive bourbon apartment experience. One lucky winner and a guest will be invited to stay at Whisky Row Retreat during National Bourbon Day on June 14th. And the entire guest experience at the Whisky Row Retreat will center around unprecedented access to the production of the bourbon, the brand, and the people behind Old Forester. The contest winner and a guest will be invited to partake in special activities at the Old Forester Distilling Company, including experiencing the process of creating a barrel, joining Jackie Zykin in a single barrel selection, and custom cocktail classes, such as learning how to make the brand's signature perfect old fashioned. To enter the Whisky Row Retreat contest, fans 21 and older can enter by sharing an essay on why they think they should be chosen to win and stay at the Whisky Row Retreat. And you can do this by visiting oldforester.com/Whisky Row Retreat. The entry for deadline is April 20th of 2020. Four Roses Small Batch Select is expanding beyond its 2019 initial launch of only being in 5 states. New markets where Small Batch Select will be available in the coming months include Colorado, Florida, Illinois, Indiana, Massachusetts, Michigan, Missouri, New Jersey, North Carolina, Ohio, Tennessee, Washington, and Wisconsin. Independent Stave Company and the Boswell family, who you might remember Brad Boswell, the CEO, back on episode 185, are giving $1 million to the University of Kentucky to further spirits research at the James B. Beam Institute for Kentucky Spirits. The gift will fund a new maturation facility that will allow the Beam Institute to experiment with barrel aging spirits produced in its research distillery. The only one of its kind in the United States, this new warehouse will have a 600-barrel capacity and become an interactive classroom and laboratory where students and scientists can tackle real-life industry issues. Do you find yourself talking to the same people every day about bourbon and realize you talk to them more than maybe some of your best friends from school? I think we're all in that same situation now, and that's what today's episode is all about. Bourbon has a magical element to it that seems to bring people together across every demographic and share a common bond. But perhaps you're getting started and you want to figure out, how do you find your bourbon people? We sit down with Jeremy Mandel. He's an admin and founder of a few Facebook communities, and he's also one of our Patreon supporters. We go through what it takes to find connections with other like-minded individuals. That can be done either online with people around the world, or perhaps it's in your own backyard with meetup groups, bourbon societies, and much more. You'll come away at the end of this realizing you've probably followed some of these same steps already without even realizing it. And hey, if you want to be a part of another community, join us on Patreon, where we are 700 plus members strong and growing every single week. As a final reminder, we are doing our 2020 Bourbon Pursuit audience survey, and we want to know more about you, our listeners. So if you've got 30 seconds to spare, and I promise it's only 30 seconds, please visit bourbonpursuit.com/2020 survey. All right, it's time for the show. Here's Joe from Barrel Bourbon, and then you've got Fred Minnick with Above the Char.
It's Joe from Barrel Bourbon. Myself and our master distiller, Trip Stimson, spend weeks choosing barrels to create a new batch. We meticulously sample every barrel to make sure the blend is absolutely perfect. Next time, ask your bartender for Barrel Bourbon.
I'm Fred Minnick, and this is Above the Char. Money. Oh, we talk about it. It's the root of all evil, and we wish we had more of it, and people tell themselves that money can't buy you happiness. Well, you know, money is very, very, very important. And right now you have distillers from Washington to Florida and from Texas to South Dakota, all scrambling, going to banks, venture capitalists, private investors, angel share people, friends, family. Hell, you might even just randomly run into someone in the airport. You're hitting them up for money. There are so many people looking for money in this space, and people just don't understand whiskey. I sometimes wonder what the world would look like in the distilling business if mainstream businesses understood what this world encompassed. That, in fact, that bourbon is its own audience. Bourbon is as big as a sports team or a NFL franchise or even a sports league. It's bigger than a lot of television shows, and if people would actually just kind of wake up and look past the alcohol aspect, we may be hearing about brands that you never even knew about. But because somebody can't get the money that they need to start the distillery of their dreams, we're not going to hear about them. And there are people like Cedar Ridge in Iowa, where the farmer, the winemaker, he leveraged his house, everything that he owns, his land. I mean, I think he might even leveraged a kidney or two just to start the brand Cedar Ridge. He kept believing in it, and he kept believing in it. And then finally he got a big, big break. And that is just it. Everybody needs a break in this business, but it all starts with the money. And I'll be damned if there's just not enough of it to go around. And that's this week's Above the Char. Hey, did you know that I have got a new podcast? It's in the music interview section. So help me become the #1 music interview podcast on Apple. Go over there and search for my name, The Fred Minnick Show, and then we'll have the #1 bourbon podcast and the #1 music interview podcast. Go check it out. Until next week, cheers.
Welcome back to an episode of Bourbon Pursuit, the official podcast of Bourbon. Kenny, Ryan, and Fred here talking about a fun cultural topic. You know, this is something that even this podcast wouldn't have started if it wasn't for the type of the topic that we are actually talking about tonight. And it's kind of really, I guess you could say it's a way that you branch out a little bit. You end up growing. We've all had friends that we get through school and college or work or anything like that. And then you end up finding, I can find friends in other things such as hobbies. And really bourbon is one of those things that we talk about all the time. It's what brings people together. And that's kind of what brought this podcast together. I mean, Ryan was really on the idea of, hey, let's start a bourbon podcast. And I think I know this guy named Kenny.
Yeah, we weren't really friends. And so
we were acquaintances at that point, really.
Well, ironically enough, we both liked EDM before bourbon, so that was the introduction, and then the bourbon kind of brought us together. But yes, bourbon has definitely, I'm amazed at how many people and how vast my network has become just because of bourbon, and it's crazy, it's just nuts. It's a very cool thing and very humbling thing. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about it because I've been so blessed to meet so many fortunate people, Fred included. Not just doing your yard. We're now friends. And so
I feel good. I mean,
we were actually friends before that too.
Yep, exactly. So
yeah,
I feel good because Fred and I we're Facebook official friends. So I feel like I made it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We get to see everything that's happened in our personal lives, and it's kind of grown since there. And now we're gotten to the point where I think, is there a day that goes by we all don't text each other?
I don't think there is actually.
Yeah. So
no, it's like
our text,
like part of my repertoire.
Fred and I's text chain started at 6 a.m. Kenny chimes in about 10 a.m.
Yeah, you always get started way too early. I don't know how you do it.
It's not by choice.
Yeah.
I got a 5-year-old elbowing me in the back. Daddy, get up. Daddy, get up.
So our guest just chimed in there. So let's go ahead and introduce him and kind of really start talking about the meat of the subject. So tonight we're joined by Jeremy Mandel. Jeremy is a member of our Patreon community and came to us with this topic. So Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. I've been listening to you forever. Really happy to be here.
Hopefully we're making a dream come true tonight. You are on Bourbon Pursuit.
Thanks for putting up with us all these years.
I can't even tell you how long. I don't even know.
Yeah, don't meet your idols.
Yeah, it's a terrible idea.
We're lame.
So Jeremy, let's hear your kind of coming to age tale of bourbon. How did you really get into it? Was there a first sip or some sort of introduction?
Growing up, I had like I would imagine a lot of people do just in high school. I guess I shouldn't say that, but I'm
pretty sure it's common. Even master distillers say they started in it.
But we had a little poker group with some friends, and we would always try and get a bottle of something for our games. And we found because then it truly was finding. We found a bottle with a nice little horse on the top, and it was a round little ball. And my goodness, it was delicious. So that was back when you could go into a store and buy some Blantons. But that kind of kicked it off. Went through college, and then probably, 2-3 years after graduating college, I went to the University of Arizona. Was talking to a buddy of mine, Tori Levy, who was in my fantasy football league. He beat all of us, and when I sent him the money, he sent me a picture of him cracking a Pappy 15. And I had read about that, but I'd never had it or even knew anyone that could get it. So I said, how the heck did you get that thing? And then he showed me, oh my goodness, there is bourbon on the internet. Mm-hmm. So it was just kind of a spiral from there. But, from there you meet a whole bunch of people, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, kind of create a little bourbon community. And that's kind of how this whole series of cardboard boxes behind me came to be.
Yeah, we're about to say that kind of justifies your level of commitment to this. I think all of us have a room in the house or a closet of something that just has boxes of, or I should say, just cardboard
I don't know if
boxes
it's
stacked with inside
a
each
level
other.
of commitment so much as it's a level of cheapness.
That too.
I certainly don't want to pay $4 for a box. So my goodness.
Yep.
Yeah.
Every time I get an Amazon package, I'm like, is this going to be good for future use to ship something?
Well, it gets to the point now where you can train your significant other when they understand what the right size box is, and they'll be like, "Honey, I saved this for you."
Yeah, my wife said, this is a perfect box to get some of those little stupid bottles that you do.
What's the stupid bottles?
The 2-ounce samples.
Ah, gotcha. Yeah.
It's little, but it's perfect for your little stupid bottles.
So she's supportive of the hobby. That's great.
Supportive in that this is existing, but she certainly gives me crap all the time.
Oh yeah. Well,
Isn't that her job though, to give you a little shit?
I think so.
Yeah.
Just join the club at that point.
Right.
So you're
Yeah.
fine. So I guess let's go ahead and kind of talk about, we can each share some of these stories of how we got introduced to it. And Fred, I don't know if we've ever heard your story, like kind of how did somebody introduce you to bourbon, and sort of how did that process start?
Yeah. I was drinking bourbon and, I didn't actually drink in high school like that. So I was not, the only times that I had drank at high school it wasn't bourbon.
he was smoking weed.
He was doing hard drugs.
He was
back
doing
then.
those double dragon drinks.
So when I went to college, I became a big, beam drinker. And, my first legal drink was, Jim Beam White. And I remember going into the liquor store at that time, and there was like Old Fitzgerald and I've thought about this a lot. I wish I could travel back in time to Stillwater, Oklahoma, when I was, just turning 21, which would have been 2000, and just like clean those shelves out because they were loaded with stuff that now I would, I've spent $400 or $500 to $1,200 on. So it's, I definitely was not drinking well, but when I was drinking bourbon, it was always Jim Beam White Label. If I was like wanting to live high on the hog, I'd get Maker's Mark. But
who's the person that introduced you? Like did you actually just go into the store and say like, I think I feel like drinking bourbon?
Have you ever
today?
been to a fraternity party?
I have.
Yeah. So who gave me the bottle? I don't know. I will say probably the moment that I fell in love with it, it was probably on a fraternity bus on our way to New Orleans from Baton Rouge. We were there for like some kind of convention. Man, it was very tasty. I love the taste of it. And then I found myself like ordering Jack or Jim instead of beer, or sometimes both. And at that young age. And then when I was in Iraq, we couldn't, it was against our general orders to have to have liquor or have anything. So I would have friends pour out Listerine bottles and fill it with Jim Beam or Jack Daniels at the time. And because
those were your stupid bottles.
Yeah. if you compare like a traditional bottle of Listerine next to like Beam or Jack, they're the same color. So the MPs couldn't crack it open, because they couldn't, they wouldn't necessarily, think to look at that. But so that's how we used to do it. And I actually there was a unit that would go into like northern Iraq in Erbil, and they would buy cases of liquor, and occasionally like the South African contingent that was there, they would break it out. So like bourbon is, in my adult life, bourbon has always played a role. In terms of like where I really fell in love with it, to be honest with you, is with my wife, because she's a big bourbon drinker, like, and I started
I was just drinking it. Was I appreciating it prior to her? Probably not. But I don't think I appreciated many things until my wife.
Oh,
wow.
I'm gonna make sure she gets that soundbite. What about you, Ryan? I think we talked. I think this was actually episode 1, right? Episode 1 of Bourbon Pursuit is where we talked about ours. But let's go ahead and rehash yours.
Yeah. So thinking back down memory lane, it was in Bardstown, as you may or may not know where I'm from. But no, yeah, definitely.
You should be proud of that, man. That's
I know.
You get like bourbon royalty DNA in your blood.
Yes, and a lot of connections. Yes, throughout. But no, the first time it was like at a field party, and my buddy, his name's Pikey. I know, weird name, but he had Evan Williams and Coke, and I was like, let me try that. And it was the first time I kind of ever drank it. I was like, oh, this tastes like sweet nectar. Like this is amazing. And then from there, yeah, just drank so much Jim Beam White Label in college. Oh my god, I can't even drink it now. Like, can't even look at it because it brings back so many bad memories, but good memories. But didn't really like start getting serious till, I don't know, after college. I mean, my dad does a lot of work for the bourbon industry. He's a machinist, so he does tool and die repair. And I would deliver parts to him or for him to the different distilleries. And I remember, just seeing the bottles. They would always give him stuff, and then I would take it to in college. And so I vividly remember taking like some Elijah Craig 21s and Noah Mills 15s and taking them to college parties and like totally mixing them with Coke or ginger ale and like just had no clue what I had. And so yeah, just kind of progressed from there. And then like really started appreciating when I went to school at Rutgers in New Jersey. Kind of nobody there really knew it, so I kind of preached the gospel up there and kind of started really diving into it. And then I met Kenny, and then found out there's this whole world of collecting and trading and flipping and collecting, all this stuff. And then so you go down that rabbit hole, and then I'm like, well, why don't we? I can't just like have the hobby. I got to start a business about it, So can't just leisurely enjoy bourbon with friends. So I'm like, let's start a podcast. But yeah, it's and now, I'm no one's a stranger to me, and so like I've just reached out to anybody that has the same interest in me. I'm not afraid to talk to them and reach out to them. So I've met so many people that enjoy bourbon, and it's been like crazy. And it's cool because I'm from there, and when I grew up, no one gave a shit about it, and now everybody gives a shit about it. And just seeing the town flourish and stuff, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll touch more on like meeting new people and stuff with inside of bourbon. I'll kind of recap mine. I know I've probably said it before. I have the same sort of coming to age tale as Fred over there. So I joined a fraternity on the University of Kentucky's campus. And I mean, I remember back, it was $10 for a 24 pack of Natty Light. And being an undergrad, yeah, you always just you have $10, you give it to one of the juniors or seniors within the fraternity. They'd run out, you come back, and like that's your drinking for the evening. However, I remember hanging out with some of the older upperclassmen, and yeah, they were all sitting around drinking bourbon and Coke. And back then, our drink of choice was Kentucky Tavern. That was our go-to, and that was kind of like my first introduction. They were actually known as, and the fraternity was actually known as one of the biggest bourbon drinking fraternities on campus. Now, I don't know if that was a good thing or bad thing at the time, but because everybody knows what happens if you get a little too bourbon drunk when you're a little young and stupid. But back then, it was a way to kind of get an introduction to it. So of course, mixing with bourbon and Coke. However, at the time, this was also a time when you're drinking not to sit there and enjoy it. You're drinking to consume and have a good time. And, all that aside, you don't feel as bloated when you have a few bourbon and Cokes after you do trying to have like 8 to 10, 12 beers. So it actually made you feel a little bit better going throughout the night. And
Yeah.
now
So,
the next
don't
morning,
interrupt you. My dad's famous line is, and I think I said this on episode 1, is if you're drinking beer, you're watching the party. If you're drinking bourbon, you are the party.
There we go.
So I've always loved that line. But anyways,
Save
sorry.
that. Let's go on to the next T-shirt.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's sort of how it started for me. And ever since I did that, like I was always one person that was kind of like preaching, like always do bourbon and cokes. During college, it just seemed like the easiest way to do it. And not only that, is me and my roommate at the time, we became social chairs. Social chair is a nice word to say party planner for back in college in the fraternity days. And so our biggest, actually, this is what I truly miss about college, is that your biggest worry is where we're going to party on Thursday and Friday night. And that's what you had to set up. And so back then, UK was a very dry campus, and you couldn't have any alcohol within inside the fraternity houses at all. So our goal was to say, how do we have house parties and still serve liquor? And so what we did is we got those massive Gatorade jugs that you see on the sidelines of football stadiums, and we filled those, and it was one handle of Kentucky Tavern to 2 liters of Diet Coke, and so everybody drank bourbon and Coke at the parties, and that's how we continued that to flourish for a while. But after college, then is kind of when the appreciation started. I didn't stop drinking bourbon; it was still bourbon and Cokes, and that's where the progression starts, where you start getting rid of the Coke, you start getting rid of the ice, and you start learning to drink it neat. Old Forester became a staple for me. Every once in a while, splurging on small batch. You know, Fred, you talked about going back to the store and thinking of all those bottles that you could have had. My God, even I went to the liquor store, and when I was there buying for parties, I would buy probably, 10 cases of 6 or 1.75 liters of Kentucky Tavern every single week. I don't think I even looked at any other bottles on the shelves. I always looked to figure out where could I get the cheapest price.
You're like, that's overpriced shit.
I mean, didn't really know any better at the time. And to be honest, even after college, I didn't really know any better either. I was drinking Four a small batch. I didn't know limited editions even existed until I was working at a company. And there was a guy that worked there, and we talked about bourbon all the time. You know, we'd sit there and talk about bottles. We'd come together, and he's the one who introduced me to limited editions. And this was 2012, late or early 2013 timeframe, something like that. And he's like, "Hey, I got a few extra things. I'll just sell them to you at cost because I'm just overflowing." And so he sold me a Four Roses 125th anniversary, an Old Rip squat bottle, a Jefferson's, I think it was 21 maybe. There was, and they were all at retail. At the time, I was just like, oh gosh, like
That's a lot of money.
Like $80 a bottle? Like, you sure about this? And so that's kind of what got me onto that train. And then, of course, as Jeremy said, you find out about online forums, and then the whole world of different things start opening up to you, of things that you never even knew existed. Yeah. And I think that's really where the rabbit hole starts for most of us. And I think that's kind of where the conversation keeps going for a lot of us here, because the online community is really where a lot of the relationships are built. It's also where a lot of relationships go to die and get let's be honest, there's a lot of butthurt that happens out there. So
feelings journals
in the bourbon world, what are you talking about?
Yeah, right. You mentioned one thing, and then all of a sudden you got people either hating on you or loving you. So Jeremy, kind of talk about your introduction into like the bourbon online communities.
So my buddy Tori said, "Hey, yeah, I got this Pappy 15 because I finally found a good use for Facebook." So I got invited to one of those deals. Saw that, my first love bourbon wise was Blanton's, and I got on there, and within 5 minutes, I saw somebody was selling a Blanton's that was dated in like 1988, and I didn't realize that whiskey existed before I drank it. So bought that 1988 Blanton's and still have about a quarter of it. And really from there, it sort of just went into a network. You kind of almost fall into this accidentally, and I'm sure that y'all's experiences are very similar. But you find some people that you've got good relationships with, and now I'm a part of a few groups that I'm really proud to be a part of, and it's been really cool. And, I've got a network really across the country, coast to coast, and actually even out of the country, just from those stupid Facebook groups. And,
Can you, in most major towns, if you need to sleep on someone's couch, you can do it through Bourbon?
I'm going to Florida for business on Friday, and I am crashing in the spare bedroom of a bourbon friend that night.
No way. That's awesome.
We're going to be drinking well.
Have you met him before in person?
Yes, a couple times. Actually, he and I have not picked a barrel together, but we got to take part in what to me is my favorite part about a lot of this stuff is the charity component. And there was a guy in Florida who had a really terrible cancer diagnosis, and young guy, about 21 years old, 22 maybe. And without getting super deep in the details of it, I went down there last year because we raised him about $18,000. And I went down there to go with him to present the money to him and his family. And that was the first time that I crashed at his. Well, no, I didn't crash at his place, but we met that time.
Like, here's a check. By the way, can I stay in your spare bedroom?
Yeah, right. So this is actually the first time I'm crashing at his house, but we have met before. But that's always a lot of fun, and of course, my wife thinks it's ridiculous, but we're in this city. I got to go see this guy. So, but yeah, you get this network, and I'm sure you guys are all the same in that regard. You got kind of people all over the country that from random. This guy helped me find this thing I was looking for, and of course, my wife would say, "Well, why were you looking for that in the first place? You have 200 something, 300 something." But
this sounds all too familiar.
Yeah, no, you've never heard that before, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's you form these communities. We've been able to do a lot of good. We've been able to do a lot of bad too. But it's a lot of fun, and it's this whole kind of separate world that you get to be a all around this brown water stuff that we all like to drink.
Every time. Go ahead.
I was going to ask, like you talk about like meeting up like with individuals, but do you ever like throw get-togethers where your buddies that you've met online or whatever, you guys go to a house or you go to a bar? Do you all have like special events or anything like that?
So nothing that's terribly scheduled, but one of the bourbon groups I'm in is called Karma, and we did the first one was it's kind of always centered around barrel picks. So about a summer of 2017, we all got together, did a Four Roses pick, a Knob Creek pick, a couple other things that I'm not remembering right now. But there was a good 30, 35 of us that got together. I remember we all went to Haymarket one night, and that was a blast. And it's all these people who I recognize from one single picture. But it was really cool. So we've done that. Couple of buddies, we rebarreled a whole bunch of mash bill number 1, I think it was, from Buffalo Trace, and we threw it up in a barrel at a buddy's farm in Tennessee, and we all got together about 2 months ago to see if it sucked. And fortunately it didn't suck. So we had a weekend at an Airbnb on the river or lake or some body of water, and it's a great time. And those people end up becoming some of your best friends. It's really bizarre, but it actually ends up happening that way.
Every time I go meet my bourbon or internet friends, my wife's like, "What are you doing going to meet your internet friends? You're going to be on Dateline one of these times."
The barrel pick that I went to, my wife was convinced I was going to be raped and murdered. She was shocked when I showed back up at the house.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I think we all get that every once in a while. I think my wife is getting a little bit more attuned to it because, of course, through our community, through Patreon, we get emails all the time, and we try to make it when we can of people saying, we'd love to just come and meet up for a drink, and sometimes we can make it happen, and she's always kind of like, all right, well, just make sure you text me underneath the table in case you need something.
Yeah, I remember one time I was going to meet up with Kenny and a couple of Patreon guys, and I got in the Uber, and Tiffany's like, "Text me as soon as you get there, and like make sure as soon as you leave, text me. And I'm like, okay, I promise I'm going to make it home. They're not going to kill me.
We're a tag team. We can take anybody.
Yeah.
But back to kind of, oh, go ahead, Jeremy.
I was going to say, you guys look tough. You can take them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Kenny's not, but I am.
Oh,
Just kidding.
I haven't worked out in a while.
He does
You're wiry,
P90X.
though.
And
You're wiry.
Yep, I am. So let's kind of back to the, the community aspect of this. You had mentioned karma. I mean, are you in with other groups and stuff like that where you kind of find those ins? And I guess are there certain types of groups that create more bonds than others? What do you get if you mix Seattle craft, Texas heritage, and Scottish know-how? That's Two Bar Spirits. Two Bar Spirits traces its roots to a ranch in rural Texas run by the founder, Nathan Kaiser's family for 6 generations. Nathan grew up on the ranch with stories of relatives bootlegging moonshine. And after moving into Seattle, he wanted to keep the family tradition alive, and he opened Two Bar Spirits in 2012. They're a very traditional distillery, making everything from scratch, and each day starts by milling 1,000 pounds of grain. Their entire product lineup consists of only 2 whiskeys, their moonshine and the only bourbon made in Seattle. Both bottles are being featured in Rockhouse Whiskey Club's next box. Rockhouse Whiskey Club is a Whiskey of the Month club, and they're on a mission to uncover the best flavors and stories that craft distilleries across the U.S. have to offer. Rockhouse ships out 2 of the featured distillery's finest bottles, along with some cool merchandise in a box delivered to your door every 2 months. Go to RackHouseWhiskeyClub.com to check it out and try some 2 Bar for yourself. Use code PURSUIT for $25 off your first box.
What's up, everyone? I'm John Henderson, your admin over at the Bourbon Pursuit Discord server. As a coordinator for the Christmas fundraisers held by the Bourbon Pursuit, I'd like to thank everyone who contributed. I couldn't be more proud of this community. One perk of joining the Bourbon Pursuit on Patreon is that you get access to real-time chat with other members, along with Kenny, Ryan, and Fred through Discord. From photo sharing and sample swaps to events where ultra-limited releases like Willet bottles are exchanged, there's always something going on. Right now, over 300 members of the Patreon community have joined and are connecting over our passion for bourbon. If you're not on Patreon, now's a great time to join us and to get involved with the community in a whole new way. Come check it out for yourself and be part of the behind-the-scenes chat, photos, and video calls. We'd like to have you join us on a live virtual pour, where we all discuss a Pursuit Series release. Cheers.
Are there certain types of groups that create more bonds than others?
So community-wise, I'm a part of 2 groups that really are my bourbon community, I would say. One is Karma. That was a cost plus ship group, which I'm sure we'll talk about what that is. But essentially it's, I because of that, I feel comfortable that if there's ever anything I want to try, from some, what's a good example? I'm a Four Roses. That Four Roses is my top of the line, particularly the OESO recipe. And Liquor Barn had a OESO barrel a month ago or so. I got 2 bottles over there, but I'm down in Texas, and that's because of the connections I've made in my cost ship group, Karma. That's been a great deal. You meet all kinds of great people. Then I'm also a part of a barrel picking group called 21 Kings, and I've made a bunch of great connections there. I'm going to be up in Kentucky in a couple of weeks to pick a Four Roses barrel and a Willet Rye barrel. And that's really, it started more as we want to be able to pick barrels and not share it among 200 people kind of thing. But, you make these connections with people. It's really interesting. There's not a lot that I've experienced in the world that bonds people together like picking a barrel of bourbon. I don't know what the secret sauce well, I know what the sauce is, but
the common denominator.
Yeah, but you pick a barrel with somebody, you're pals. You talk the whole thing through. It's a painstakingly excellent process if you do it right. And I've been really lucky to get to do it a few times, and I'm really excited to get to do it again here in a couple weeks. But it's been a really cool experience. You get to get really, really good bourbon or rye or whatever it is you're picking. And you get to, make connections with people that you at least for me, certainly, I never would have made those connections otherwise.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm totally with you, and I guess that also kind of thinks about really where does the relationship start and how does it build, and I have the same things with two other buddies that really we knew we didn't really know each other, and then we kind of found each other through bourbon, and then their personal lives.
Mm-hmm.
You start knowing about their children, about their vacations, about where they're buying a house,
Their IRAs.
Yeah, everything.
No, I'm kidding.
But I mean, that's kind of like how it kind of blips like that, where should I say, it really kind of snowballs, where you kind of have this common foundation, and then from there you start talking to them more than you did the people that you went to school with years ago, and they become something, because it seems like bourbon is like an everyday thing. It's constantly changing, and the people that care about it are always in tune with it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really nice, aside from just the personal connections, it's just great to have a network of fellow dorks that we can talk about that stuff with. I live in San Antonio, which is, it's got a good bourbon community here, but it's sort of, from a maturity level, it really only became a big thing down here in the past 3 to 6 months.
I always thought the Esquire bar had a really nice bourbon selection.
The Esquire is fantastic. And they do the San Antonio Cocktail Conference down here, which is really
I
great.
come every year.
Was in the back of the room last time you did one.
You can stay on this couch next time.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you mind? I mean,
no,
St. Anthony's expensive.
Yeah, if you don't mind golden retriever sniffing around you, you can. You always got a couch here. But there's a few people here and there, but like as compared to say like Houston, with Houston's, I mean, and I know you guys had the Houston Bourbon Society on a while back. That's been a big deal for a few years now. So, like, just as an example, and I mean no disrespect in saying this, but in the San Antonio group, the Old Ezra 7-year is a big damn deal right now. And it's an excellent drink, and I really like it for what it is. But if you've been into the hobby really deeply for 5+ years, then you're drinking other stuff too. So it's not as far down the line as say like a Houston or obviously anywhere in Kentucky, which made the online communities a really great thing for us.
And I guess another question with that is, are you seeing a lot of, so you have your local society, and that's another place where a lot of people can go and find some of those bourbon connections, those bourbon friends that, they live in your local area. Most of the time you might find it on, the Louisville page or the San Antonio page, and then you see each other in a meeting, and then all of a sudden things can happen through there.
Yeah. It's funny. I'm hosting, and Ryan, you joked about IRAs, but that's what I do for a living. And I can't tell you how many times one of my bourbon friends would send me a text message or an email. It's like, hey, do you mind if I ask you about this thing? So I actually do know a lot about the IRAs of some of my bourbon friends.
So yeah, I have the SP. I don't know. It's a gift.
But you end up. I just right before we got on here, my buddy Josh Hayes gave me a call. I talked to him for about a half hour, and bourbon didn't come up. So it's really cool to have connections like that.
Another thing that we kind of talked about earlier too is, and we'll kind of keep this train going with the kind of online community theme, is we're talking about raffles, and how these kind of groups that are based off raffles, it also kind of creates a little bit of camaraderie, because you've got people that either they all try to play the same number and they fight each other for it and they get to know each other through there, or there's somebody that consistently wins somebody else's raffle all the time. And so you have this also built into it, even though it's an expensive hobby, but it's something. Yeah,
we like in Karma, my cost ship group, that's the stupidest thing in the world. But when Mega Ball went from 15 numbers to, gosh, I don't know, 17 or 19 or whatever the number, not 15 anymore, we were all very upset because that diluted our chances of winning stuff. So we had to create our own weekly drawing, which is I got a bingo machine back there somewhere. So we did our own damn drawing because I didn't want to split a bottle 17 ways. I want to split it 15 ways. But yeah, you end up, particularly in some of those secondary raffle sites, you can lose just an absurd amount of money if you don't really check yourself.
Yeah, I hate Kenny for introducing me to raffles and risky whiskey in particular.
Yeah, well, after a while, you figure,
That's the reason I had to
stop
delete.
doing it.
I had to delete social media during the week. Thanks a lot.
Well, after a while, you end up, as we were talking about earlier, you kind of quit playing. But back to the community aspect of this, we look at it as an opportunity as well as to branch out. Myself gotten to know people through these communities, and Jeremy, as you mentioned, you'll travel and you go somewhere. I've got connections now in a lot of states, and so you can travel somewhere and know that you can confide in somebody and you can hang out and have a good time. You don't have to go and meet up at a bar somewhere to go and hang out. And ultimately, I don't know about you all, I'd actually rather go to somebody's house and dig into their collection and try something unique than I would to just rather meet up at a bar.
Well, it's funny. We my buddy Craig Lyman was here probably 6 months ago, and there's 3 guys here locally that are a part of the Karma group that we're all a part of, and we went out to a bar to all meet up, and about halfway through my trying that Bob Dylan whiskey, we all realized.
What did you think of that stuff? I hate to break off on that, but what did you think of the Bob Dylan whiskey?
I wasn't a tremendous fan of it.
Oh, it's gross, isn't it?
I really didn't like it.
Yeah, I didn't like it at all.
What's gross about it?
So there's so it's Dickel, and they got like the bottom of the barrel of the Dickel barrels, because it's like metallic. There's like this crazy like weird metallic note in there.
Yeah, there was something to it that I had not tasted in a bourbon before, and I don't mean that in a good way.
Yeah.
And it inspired us. We were, and you, Fred, you mentioned the Esquire. We were down the road from the Esquire, so maybe that was our problem. But we all, that drink inspired me to tell everybody, guys, the best bar in San Antonio for whiskey is at each of our individual houses. Can we please just go there? So that's what we did, and it was a hell of a lot better than the Bob Dylan whiskey.
Yeah. I'm sorry I interrupted you, but I had to ask your opinion on it.
No, I don't totally remember where I was going with that, but you're absolutely right. That stuff sucked.
What about you, Fred? I mean, Fred, if you had enough connections now when you go somewhere that you'd rather not go to a bar and you'd rather go to somebody's house and dive into a Weller Gold Vein or William Lure Weller or some old dusty Kentucky Tavern or Evan Williams or something like that?
Well, I've had some weird experiences. So
Please do share.
Yeah, I've had some weird ones. But I'll say that I still like to see what's going on in the town. 5 years ago, I was like, I don't want to go to a whiskey bar because I have everything and I don't want to spend that kind of money. And I'd rather just kind of go hang out and see something else. Now I'm kind of going back to I feel like these bars are working hard to, promote my culture, what I love. And, I got to throw them a bone. I got to go in there and pay my respect to what they're doing. So that's kind of how I think of it now, is like, I don't think of it as like, look at them and their prices as just what they are. If they're price gouging, I'll be very vocal about that. And often too, like I end up correcting spelling errors and menus. I mean, for God's sakes, why can't people spell Willet correctly? It's 2 T's. But I feel like I have a purpose, and I need to be visiting these great temples that are bastions to whiskey. And, if they invite me in, I'm gonna show, check it out. But indeed, do I like going to someone's house and going down in the basement and seeing the collection? I mean, that's like, to me, it doesn't get better than that. Mm-hmm. Now, what's weird is when, like, I come in the house
So this is where it gets weird.
And then the guy's wife's down there, and I'm like, oh.
And then she's like, who's this guy in the ascot? Who'd you bring?
Yeah.
Oh man, it can get weird. So I didn't sleep on their couch.
You're like, I'm gonna get a hotel now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's fun to look at this and look at the relationships that you do build over time, because it does seem like a lot of these hopefully will stand the test of time. You never really know, because, and I don't know, maybe this is another kind of question is, as bourbon becomes more prolific and becomes more scarce, it's even harder to find these things. And really, I don't know how much bigger these networks that people are creating right now can actually get. Can they get bigger, or you feel like, you know what, I don't have any more room in my life for new friends. We're just going to kind of keep it where it's at.
Well, for me, I mean, I don't know if we actually call the episode this, but you said the term finding your bourbon people. For me, selfishly, I found my bourbon people. My biggest group of people that I care about is about 150 people, and that's about as big as it needs to be. And we're all having, I don't know when this is going to air, but right now there's this whole BSM bourbon secondary market thing going on Facebook. We couldn't care less. And it's been incredibly entertaining for us because I know, because I've established my community, that there's not really anything that's going to come out that if I really want to try it, I can't try it. From a store pick that comes out to, I've got a buddy with a bottle of Red Hook Rye that I'm going to see if I can't finagle an ounce of it.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Bottle.
If you can find your community, then these groups of 50-some thousand people really don't matter all that much.
So I guess another question is so you found your people. We've already decided 3's enough. We're not bringing on a 4th co-host, so we've got our people. But what would you say is a good way for people to start getting introduced and sort of like find their, I guess you say their missing connections, their yings or their yangs of the bourbon community?
To me, every good bourbon connection I've come into is because somebody was doing something nice for somebody else. Whether it's, there's last year, Alamo City Liquor here had a fantastic Elijah Craig pick, bought a bunch of it and helped some friends that otherwise wouldn't have been able to get it, and they became good friends. And that favor I've been on the receiving end of that favor, from different places all over the country. And great bourbon connections for me rarely come from trying to price gouge somebody on a whatever store pick of the month it is. But if you, just be cool with people and treat and this is, I guess cliche, but treat people the way you'd want to be treated. You'll end up knowing some really cool folks, and that's what's happened to me. And that's the advice that I typically give people. Between Karma and 21 Kings, I really don't need to know anybody else. I'm thrilled to know you guys. But
can I be your friend?
we can be friends.
Yeah, on court.
But Jeremy, one of my favorite things is like I get, when I travel, I do often like just kind of connect with someone who's a listener or reader, and just like follows me on Instagram. I really do try to make an effort when I'm out to like go hang out with people. And my favorite thing to do is like learn about their jobs, because I find that we have in people's beliefs. Because what I have found is that bourbon it doesn't attract just one race or one occupation or one political or religious belief. I mean, it attracts everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And to me, that is what's so beautiful about this category, is that I could be in a room with a staunch Democrat and a staunch Republican, and they absolutely hate each other politically, but they'll just sit there and talk about how beautiful a New Riff barrel pick is. and they'll talk about that. Now, if they have 3, they might get into some fighting, but
once they cross the threshold.
But it's kind of like, Henry Clay, the great Kentucky statesman. He once said that bourbon was used to lubricate the wheels of justice, and it's like this great door opener for conversation.
Well, and I think even if you have the 3 drinks, if you come at each other from a place of respect. I mean, one of my good friends that I've met, Andrew Goodman, is a very far left person. I am not. And he lives in New York City. I was there for a business meeting. We went to one of the bars there. He bought me some vintage 17 rye, vintage 21 rye. And we talked politics for a good hour, and we walked out of there not hating each other. And it's magic how that happens nowadays. You practically can't do it.
Yeah.
What problem did you solve? I want to know. No, I'm kidding.
Absolutely none. We solved the problem of how to get more OESO for roses, but we didn't really solve any national issues. Although that's become a national issue,
for sure.
But it's a conduit for really good conversation too, like that I never would have had otherwise, and we continue to have it frequently. And then when it gets to be too much, we both say, we don't want to fight with each other. Let's have a drink.
Mm-hmm. So I had kind of talked about it earlier. With my connection, pretty much my mentor who taught me that these are what limited edition releases are. And he was able to, like I said, he gave me it at cost. So just to make sure that I'm not the only one with a story like this, I want you all to kind of talk about what are those relationships that you formed that you've gotten like a really, really good bottle of bourbon out of it just because of fostering a relationship like that.
I've had a lot of gifts. And the gentleman, the gentleman passed away, unfortunately. He was, his name was Dale Hamilton, and he was like the last, he was the guy who got cola approvals for Stitzel Weller. And he was like the last, last guy from United Distillers, before they closed Stitzel Weller. And so he has this, he had an incredible collection, and I helped him figure out what some things were, what some bottles meant. And, he came to my Legend series at the Kentucky Derby Museum, and we just became friends. I would visit him at Christmas. He would come and we'd have lunch. He'd play with my kid. And, he gave me a 1935 bottle of Weller.
Wow.
So, it was like a green label blend, and it was fantastic. And the first time I opened it, I cracked it open with Tom Colicchio from Top Chef. It was just right after my Top Chef appearance, and I wanted to celebrate with them, and so I cracked it open with them. So I had like two really cool friends, that bottle kind of connected me to.
Yeah, coming out of the gate strong here.
Yes, right, Ryan. I think you should follow that.
Well, I've had some great connections and relationships with people. Like Bill Thomas was kind enough to invite me to his house and stayed the night. We didn't crash his couch. We had a room, but just his collection. We were at his bar, and he's like, "Guys, let's just go to my house. It's so much better here." And he had a green label, or not green though, green bottle, Van Winkle Rye, one of the early editions. It's one of the best bottles I've ever had. Drew Colesveen, grew up with him from Willits. I mean, he's one of the kindest, generous people. He shares a ton of stuff with me. But the person I remember the most is probably my brother-in-law. I won't name any names, but he works at Heaven Hill, and he likes bourbon, but he knows how obsessed I am with him, and he always goes out of his way to give me a Parker's or an Old Fitz release that just came out. He always is just finding ways to give me something, and I always cherish that. So it means a lot to me.
That's a relationship by blood. That's hardly fostered over bourbon.
Exactly. But we grew up friends before, brother-in-laws. We were friends before. So, but yeah, those are the bottles that mean the most to me.
Absolutely.
I mean, in my case, it was really about people knowing what my tastes are. And as I kind of grew up in the hobby and grew up in the community, I would have people that would know the things that I enjoy and would suggest that I try something. And oftentimes the suggestion would come with a 2-ounce bottle of it showing up at my doorstep. And that's how I figured out that I loved National Distillers products. I was telling somebody kind of the things that I liked about certain things that were my favorites. And then before I knew it, there was a bottle of 1960s Old Grandad Bonded that showed up at my doorstep. And I guess I should be upset with them because it's caused me to lose a whole lot of money after that.
Yeah, that sounds like Ryan. Ryan went on a huge Old Granddad kick for a while.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Really, for me, any of that old National Distiller stuff is really just killer. It kind of hits me right in whatever my sweet spot is for whatever reason.
I'm telling you, we're bourbon friends now.
There you go. I got some stuff to send you. But that for me is one of the cooler parts of the community is, you know, people who know you, and I know other people's tastes. And if I see something, for example, I got a buddy who's a big Q lover at Four Roses, and I am not. And anytime I see a really good Q, I know exactly who it's going to a CPA office in Indiana. Because I know that's somebody that will appreciate it far more than I.
That's really cool. Yeah, it really is. I mean, and I think that's a good way to kind of start wrapping this up, because we really hit on a lot of the things of really how do we find your bourbon people, right? I mean, it all starts by a friend or somebody introduces you to bourbon. It's very rare that any of us just stumble it on our own, or maybe you do get turned on to it by social media or for the general media, TV or purposes and stuff like that. But for the majority of us, there's somebody that gives us that introduction. And I think that we have all been in a situation too. And I know anybody that's probably listening to this podcast, you're one of the geeks out there. You're one of the people that truly hone in on this craft and you really appreciate it. So odds are is that you're sharing the love of bourbon with somebody else. And so that's just how everything continues to flourish and grow. And then from there, then it becomes like, oh, add me on Facebook. Let me add you to a few groups. And then at that point, you're all in. And as Jeremy had mentioned earlier, the boxes just start showing up on your front door and your PayPal account gets a little lower. But that's just how it works. That's just how it works. So gentlemen, and Jeremy, thank you so much for joining tonight. This is again a fun topic, and I'll go ahead and kind of let you kind of say what you're going to say there.
I don't think I was going to say anything,
but now you have to.
Now you have to. You're on the spot.
Looking at me. No, it's the rule of thumb is just. I mean, and I guess it's the rule of thumb for more than just the bourbon community, but don't be an asshole.
Yep.
So, if you just be a nice guy, it's amazing what kind of connections you're coming up with. And 21 Kings is picking a barrel of Willet Rye here in a couple weeks, and I'm fortunate enough to be one of the people doing it. And I never would have gotten the chance to do anything like that had I not been able to be a part of these communities. And it's really cool. It's some of the coolest experiences I've gotten to have, and I'm really thankful for that.
I guess the other bad thing about being in these communities too is I didn't realize for years I could just drive down to Willett and just go pick up bottles in the gift shop, and I could have been doing it all along, and I just didn't know. So that's the bad part of it, but it's also a good thing because you have a lot more appreciation for what you do have. So again, everybody, thank you so much for joining tonight. Jeremy, do you have any kind of social handles or anything like that where people can find out more about you?
Anybody who wants to, I guess. I'm around on Facebook, Jeremy Mandel, Twitter @Jeremy Mandel, Instagram @Jeremy Mandel. If you want to talk to me for some strange reason, I'm available.
You never know.
Well, I know where to send. If I see an OESO, I know exactly who to call.
Send all of your OESOs to me, and I'll figure out some way to repay you that you'll be happy about.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
I know. You kind of want to just go pick a whole barrel of OESO now and just see
I know,
what we can
next
get out of
time.
them.
I
I'm
actually
kidding.
did. I have one. It was from my picks from the Icons of Whiskey when I picked those. Fucking
Which year
good
did
too.
you do? Was that the 17 or 18?
Yeah, we had all the recipes. It was. I think it was like a 11-year-old.
Yeah, that was, I think, the 2017 one. That was really good.
Yeah.
It's incredibly dorky that I can just pull it out of my head. But
He knows
Yeah,
every
that
OESO
was-
that's
yeah,
ever
so
been
that-
bottled.
So that was when I was with
Sounds like OESO was
Whiskey
delicious.
Magazine, and yeah, that we did that, and that was like one of the only times you saw all the recipes, and that was back when Four Roses. I mean, I think they brought out 40 barrels for us to taste, and
Yeah.
God, you're lucky if you get 4 now. So
Right.
Yeah, it's the way of the world now.
Yep.
All right,
Yep.
so let's go ahead and we'll sign off. So again, Jeremy, thank you so much for coming on tonight. It was a
Absolutely.
pleasure talking to you, and seriously, thank you so much for bringing this topic up because it's fun to kind of really take a retrospective look into really kind of how we all got here and why many people are still actually listening to this podcast because they all have some sort of coming of age tale that's probably very, very similar. So make sure you check out Jeremy on all those social handles. Make sure you check out Bourbon Pursuit as well as Fred Minnick on the Twitter, the Facebook, and the Instagrams. And if you're like Jeremy and you want to help support the show, he's part of our community. You can be part of our community as well. Patreon.com/Bourbon Pursuit. So thank you everybody that is a part of it. And thank you everybody that joined into the chat and watched us live. Another perk of just being a part of the community is you can be a part of these things as they're happening and be able to just chat along with us. So with that, thank you, everybody, and talk to you all next week.